Cue Dave and Ryan in 3, 2, 1.
It's Dave and Ryan's movie review.
Sponsored by the Plan Z Diet.
Hey, Dave and Ryan here, and this time we are joined in studio by a professor from the local university here, the Utah State University Eastern, Jason Olsen, who loves Captain America. Jason will be joining me throughout the Marvel quest. What do we call it, Man versus Marvel?
Yeah, sure. Why not?
Or the day when Dave's dying, or Dave dies, something.
This is how Dave
This
dies.
is how Dave dies. That's the
3-day journey.
The subtitle there. But Jason literally wrote a book about Captain America. It's on Mark Gruenwald, and we're going to talk about him. He was very, very integral in Captain America and shaping him. They gave him the reins for 10 years and let him kind of do his own thing. He was a great man. Everything that you read about this guy, he was hilarious. So we're going to bring Jason in. We're going to talk about that. And then in another segment, we're just going to talk a little bit more about Marvel, because who doesn't want to talk about Marvel? Except for Ryan. Ryan may not. He shook his head yes.
I'm right here.
He shook his head yes. We're into it. Jason, how are you today?
I am doing great. How are you doing?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for coming in, and thank you so much for taking part in the madness that's coming up in the first week there or the second weekend actually in March. We're looking forward to that, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in the next segment. But let's talk about your book. It's called Mark Gruenwald and the Star-Spangled Symbolism of Captain America. I started reading this a little bit. I've read a lot about this guy. He was a fascinating character, wasn't he?
He really was, and he loved comics. This guy was living and breathing comics well before he got to Marvel. He was fascinated by the Justice League when he was a kid. He started his own Justice League club with his friends when he was growing up in Wisconsin. And his dream was to work for Marvel and to work he wanted to work for DC, but DC turned him down. And so he ended up working for Marvel, and he started in the 70s as an assistant editor and was writing all sorts of smaller comics before he kind of worked his way up and got the shot at Captain America. Captain America in 1985, when he started, was not doing that well. It was a little bit struggling, and so he took the reins, and you say they let him do it for 10 years, and I think that's true, but he eventually gained enough clout that he didn't want to stop. And he really put a definitive take on the character and introduced us to a lot of characters and storylines that are still relevant in the MCU today.
And one of the characters that he introduced, and I found it very interesting, he introduced the character Nomad, which was kind of like a sidekick for Captain America, correct?
Well, he certainly played with the character. The character was introduced prior.
Okay.
But he kind of reestablished the character in fitting in a little bit more with that sort of edgier 90s. He was very much sort of a generic sidekick character, and he evolved him into being somebody who was a little bit edgier and much, much more interesting.
Well, and the question that I have from that is, if I remember correctly, I believe it was in Infinity War.
Okay.
That's who Chris Evans was supposed to be. Is that who they kind of based that Captain America character on a little bit?
Sometimes you know too much, Dave, so I can kind of go in a lot of different directions on who that is. My take might be that he was also playing a version of the Captain, which is another Gruenwald story from that era, where Steve Rogers is forced to stop being Captain America because comics and the government is bad, and the Red Skull. And so he stops, but he's never going to really stop being a hero, so he is no longer Captain America, and he takes on a new identity, the Captain. And so he's still doing things to help people who need it, but he's not doing it as Cap. So it felt a little bit more in line with that. The uniform is different because the uniform is what we will see with the U.S. Agent when we get to the Falcon Winter Soldier series.
Yeah.
And so it's a little bit different, but he's still always going to be doing the right thing, but no matter what the identity is. The Nomad character was actually introduced as a Steve Rogers identity back in the 70s at another time where he quit being Captain America. That time is when Watergate was running rampant, and there was a big secret villain that was behind the scenes, and it turned out to be, if you were paying enough attention, never identified by name, but it was clearly Richard Nixon. And then Cap just has to quit at that point, and Steve becomes Nomad. And then the Nomad character resurfaces with a different guy behind the cowl a little bit later.
All right, so getting back to that was a nice little divergent there, because we could talk for hours.
Oh, we could.
Unfortunately, we only have like 45 minutes in the show, but maybe we can talk more about it during the event. But in reading about this guy, the amazing thing, and some may say the tragic thing really about him was he died so young.
He did.
He died at 43. Is that correct?
That is correct.
And they said that he was, the day before, he was like up and running around and he was fine.
Yep. He would do flips throughout the Marvel bullpen, and he was just full of life. And as you were kind of insinuating, he was a jokester. He would pull pranks on everyone. He was just full of life and vitality. People thought that he was pulling another prank.
That's I read that they thought that it was another joke.
Yeah.
That he had passed away.
Yeah.
But in that time, the 10 years, what are some of the bigger storylines that he brought to light and created?
I think the biggest storyline we can think about would be the Captain one that I alluded to a moment ago, where Steve Rogers has to step down as Captain America. He makes the choice. The government basically says you can either be a government agent or you can walk away. And he chooses to walk away. So then the government puts another character in the Captain America suit, and that is John Walker, who ends up being in the MCU eventually. And he is a very, very different guy than Steve Rogers. The reason why Gruenwald did the storyline is because he said a lot of fans were going up to him at Comic-Cons and events and saying, we want Captain America to be more like Rambo. This is the 80s, so we can say things like that. And Gruenwald said, well, Steve Rogers is not Rambo. There's no interpretation of Steve Rogers as a character where we can get to Rambo. But in one interview I heard him say, but if that's what you want, I will give you that. And so he created this new character to fulfill that Rambo role. And so we get John Walker, who is violent and aggressive and murderous and very, very different.
And we got a look at him in the MCU. He was introduced in, was it the Secret Wars?
It was Falcon Winter Soldier.
Was it Falcon Winter Soldier? Okay, I couldn't remember if it was that.
And we get that scene where he uses the shield.
Yeah, literally.
Which is literally also taken from the comic. One of the most harrowing panels I remember as a kid, just watching him just kill a guy with the shield. And heck, I got to see it as an adult on the big screen.
And he's also a member of the Thunderbolts that comes out in May.
Absolutely. Yep.
And so that kind of goes into that film there. But you were saying how you've kind of gotten to know his widow a little bit.
I have.
And you're actually even working on another book.
I am. I am working on another book about another comic that Gruenwald wrote. So obviously he did 137 issues of Captain America, and that's what he's best known for. That's the first line that's written in his obituary for his achievements at Marvel. But he also wrote a 60-issue series called Quasar. Quasar is a cosmic hero. He wears cool bracelets that shoot out light things. He's kind of like the Green Lantern, but, yellower and with bracelets. And so he wrote this, and this was a passion project. This was a character that he really wanted to write about. It's a cosmic hero who's human, which was not necessarily a thing that was going on a lot back in the Marvel 80s and 90s. And so I'm writing about that series. And as you said, I've been lucky enough to get in touch with Mark's widow, and also an old friend of his who knew Mark from the comic convention days in the 70s and stayed in touch with him all the way up through the 90s. So it's been a really fun project. And as you've said, this is just a cool guy to dig deeper in. And, and I'm not necessarily getting into biographical stuff with him, but I am spending a lot of time just understanding his work. And his work is so interesting. It's entertaining. It's funny. It's deep. It's just everything you want out of a comic in the 80s and 90s. It
really is. And it's kind of amazing when you look back at, as I said, this guy's field of work that he did. He even wrote, was it the first Encyclopedia of Marvel?
Oh, yeah. That was his pet project. The official Marvel handbook was something that he did the first and the second. And he had a team that was working on it, but he wrote most of those. Even did some of the illustrations and really... He was the continuity expert of the Marvel Universe. This was the guy that knew where everybody was. So he could pull just from his head any obscure character that you can imagine. That's why it's really fun, like in Quasar, that he just starts pulling out some of the most obscure characters that you could possibly imagine and making them work. And Captain America, he's limited. That's a character that people actually knew. People had really deep affection for Captain America. There's only so much you can change, although he did that. But he didn't bring in as many obscure characters in that world. He just knew everything. I mean, this guy knew everything about the Marvel Universe.
And that was one thing, too, that I remember reading is the fact that, you know, you couldn't mess with him when it came. If you ever had a Marvel trivia night, he was the guy.
He was the guy. Well, he's probably the trivia master.
Yeah.
Nobody could touch him.
And he knew everything. And yeah, he was great with continuity and who belonged where and why this would work and why that wouldn't work. And it's just really, it's amazing when you realize that this guy, as I've said before, 10 years they gave him he took over Captain America. And as you said, at a time when Cap wasn't doing that great.
He wasn't cool. You know, I
Right.
mean, we look back at the 80s and 90s, especially as we get into the 90s, and X-Men were cool. Spider-Man was cool. Cap wasn't. And, you know, part of the trouble with Captain America is there never was that continuity. You never had one person on there. You had Stan Lee doing really good work early, and then you had a few other writers who did really good work, but for shorter periods of time. And to have somebody who can just weave everything together for so long, put Cap back on the map.
And we were talking about it before we came in here, and Ryan and I have talked about this multiple times about, you know, Captain America being like the Marvel good boy, the Boy Scout.
Sure.
And I would flip that to DC would be Superman. And it's so
Absolutely.
difficult. I talked to you about the fact that it's so difficult to have a story, to have a good story, because there's just not that other side to them, the other flip of that coin. And I think when they came out with like Civil War and those kinds of things, it kind of gave him the opportunity to, you know, have a different view from everybody else, even though he was still towing the line, right?
Absolutely. And what's funny about that is if you look objectively at Civil War, you can very compellingly make an argument for either of those characters, Iron Man or Captain America, being in the right. For me, I never questioned Cap. I just don't question it. So if Steve says this is what we're doing, this is what we're doing. But it was interesting to me afterwards to talk to friends who were like, well, I think Iron Man might be right. I'm like, really? Interesting. And then they talk about it. I'm like, oh, yeah, makes sense. It's Steve, though.
And there's even still, it's alluded to, it just hit out the last couple of days. And as I said, we'll talk more about this in the next segment. In fact, this will be a good segue to get us to the next segment. In the new one that's coming out, Brave New World, there's a scene where Thunderbolt Ross, played by Harrison Ford, is talking to Sam, and he asks him, he tasks him with rebuilding the Avengers.
Yeah.
And he tells him, you know, Sam looks at him and he says, well, what happens if I want to go do something and you don't think it's right, or vice versa, something like that? And he goes, we'll discuss it when it happens. Because that's what happened in the last one. That's what happened. That's why he became this, you know, he kind of became this fringe character going off, and he did his own thing. Because he felt, by all rights, it was right for him to do that.
Absolutely. It's a funny thing. People often think that Captain America must just be tied to the U.S. government, you know, just toes the line for whatever he's told. He is very much not that. He hasn't been that since the 40s. And so it's fascinating to see the way that, whether it's Steve or it's Sam, they do what's right, and they understand what's right, and they know what's right isn't always what the government tells them is right.
And it's not always popular either.
Not at all.
No. What have you got any thoughts, Ryan, on Captain America before we move on to the next segment there?
I like Captain America.
Do you? I know we've kind of...
I've just been soaking this all in, just like, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, really?
But because, you know, he's the Boy Scout of the MCU and of Marvel Comics. I don't think you're going to find I mean, I know that Sentry, who we're going to see in Thunderbolts, is kind of what they say is the equivalent to Superman. Yeah. But, you know, personality-wise, it's got to be Steve Rogers.
Oh, I would think so. And they're also the two most American superheroes in a way. And with Captain America, I don't need to defend that. I think we get that. But Superman is not from here. He's good because he grew up in Kansas to good people. And so I think both of those characters sort of embody American decency and goodness. And that's why I think they're so compelling.
All right. So once again, we've been speaking with Dr. Jason Olsen of Utah State University Eastern, who wrote the book, Mark Gruenwald, and I can't see it from here. My eyes are old. Mark Gruenwald and the Star-Spangled Symbolism of Captain America. Great book. You can find it on Amazon. Get it today. And if you're around our area and you're really nice and you talk to him about Captain America, he might even sign it for you. He might. All right, when we come back, we're going to talk about Marvel some more. We're going to talk about the event that's coming up the 6th, 7th, and 8th of March, and get into a little bit of a preview maybe of Brave New World that comes and hits theaters next week when we come back on Dave and Ryan's Movie Review, brought to you by the Plan Z Diet. Back here with you on Dave and Ryan's Movie Review, and we've got author Jason Olsen joining us, and now we're just going to dig in, and we're going to have fun, and we're going to talk about Marvel. Jason is going to be one of our guests that will join me as I try to stay awake for is it 75 hours?
It's 3 days.
3 days.
3 whole days.
As I sit and try and stay awake and watch all the first 33 movies of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. 33. We start
Thursday at
7 in the morning, and I'll be done at about 1 o'clock on Sunday.
Okay.
So that's, Thursday to Friday, Friday to Saturday. There's 3 days, so that's 36. That's 24. That's 72 hours plus another 5.
105.
Whatever.
I don't know. I'm bad at math.
That's okay. I don't have a calculator in front of me. But Jason has decided that he will be one of the ones that's going to keep me awake. And we talked earlier before we came on. And I know now what his favorite MCU movie is because he's going to join me at 3 in the morning in a Zoom call, and we're going to watch Winter Soldier together.
Oh, snap.
I love that movie, I'm telling you.
Is your wife coming too?
She will not come for that one. I know. She doesn't want to.
I thought that was her favorite one.
She says it is, but
obviously not. I think she's lying.
We're calling her out.
You heard it right here.
If there's anything that can keep you up at 3 in the morning,
it's got to be Winter Soldier, right?
I tell you, it'll be easy for me to say because I will be sleeping around that time. Even if you won't, I'm not here to gloat about that.
Hey, that's fine. But yeah, let's get into it. How closely, in your opinion, is Chris Evans' portrayal of Captain America to the comic and to everything else? I
think it's fantastic. I really do. I think Chris Evans got it in a way that I wasn't sure anyone could. I will admit, I admitted this to you earlier, I have this connection to Captain America. I love the character. Everybody knows I love the character. When the movie was announced, and it was in a different time. This is 2008, 2009, right, when the movie was announced. I was nervous because I did not want my favorite character to look super silly on the screen. And so when Chris Evans was announced, I thought, okay, well, that's the guy that played the Human Torch in the Fantastic Four. He's fine, I guess. He seems boring, kind of, at the time. He just felt like, that's a good-looking guy.
Right. He played comic roles back then.
He did. Well, He was Scott Pilgrim.
Yeah, and then also, he was in The Losers. I don't remember his character's name. That movie was hilarious.
That was a great movie. Have you ever seen The Losers?
I have.
That was pretty good. That might have. Did that come out before or after?
I can't remember.
Before.
What, did it come out before Captain America? But it was just a great. I think it was a great match, and that is one thing that I would say Marvel is the best at casting. Period.
No question. So many remarkable.
They used to.
Well, okay.
When they recasted Robert Downey Jr.
No,
just let it go.
Can't you give me that?
Let him go.
Can't you give me the one?
He died. Let him go.
He's not Robert Downey. He's not Tony Stark though. Now he's Victor Von.
Well, he's like his magical twin.
No, but the funny thing about it was, we have this argument all the time because, like, about 2 or 3 weeks before, I said, there are multiverses and storylines out there where there's a Tony Stark variant that plays that is Doctor Doom. Mm-hmm. I said they could bring him back to be Doctor Doom, and boom.
I think Deadpool was right. Just let the multiverse die.
Well, I think what's going to be fascinating when we get to this is that, we're going to see Downey as Doom, whether you like it or not. We're getting there.
He's there.
And Chris Evans is coming back, and I don't think we're going to be happy about it.
No, I don't think so either. I think do you feel he's going to come back as Captain Hydra?
I think there are 2 directions. Okay. And I think Captain Hydra is actually the one that makes me happier.
Okay.
When I tell you what the other one is, it's much, much worse. But in the 80s, The Red Skull is resurrected,
Right.
and he is in Steve Rogers' body.
Okay.
And so it feels like you could, if you wanted to, have a Red Skull that is Steve Rogers' body. I don't like that. That makes me even more upset than Captain
I
Hydra.
like that.
That makes you
idea.
nervous. Because I've read, and you never know what's going to happen. You just don't. But they said that, that when Doom shows up, he's going to bring, I guess we can call them harbingers with him, and that Chris Evans is going to play one of those characters. So who knows who he's going to be?
Who knows? It's not going to be good.
No.
We're going to be upset. And,
No.
and he's going to be great at it because he has proven that time and time again.
He truly has. And the other thing too that I cheated. We'll wait for a full-fledged trailer. I watched the teaser for Fantastic Four.
Dave.
I know, but I just want this. I want them to get it right. And I don't know how far you go with Fantastic Four.
I go back a long ways.
See, this new one's set back in the 60s?
The 50s or 60s. I just want them to get it right.
I love the look of the thing so far. I like that trailer. I also watched the trailer. I think I watched the trailer about 15 times yesterday. And I'm excited. You got to be cautious because we know what other Fantastic Four movies we've gotten,
Yes.
but not in the MCU. Not with this cast. I think we're going to be okay. It looks great. It's got this whole Jetsons vibe.
Yep.
We're clearly going to work into the multiverse again, whether we like that or not.
Yep. You get to see
let it go.
you get to see a look of Galactus in this one.
Yeah.
The only thing you didn't
Maybe
see in
that's
it
what
that
Chris
I was
Evans
a
is.
little upset was I want to see the Silver Surfer.
Yeah.
And we know that it's Julia Garner. We know that she's a female Silver Surfer, but we want to see that. I want to see that.
We will. We will.
No, I wanted it now. I don't want to have to wait.
We got to see John Malkovich with a
telling your
long
wife.
beard and long hair.
And who do you think he is?
I think he's going to be the Red Ghost,
That's what I think too.
which is awesome because let's go deep, let's get obscure, and give me what I want, which are those deep cut, weird Marvel villains.
And bring his monkey villains with him.
Let's do it.
So, but talking about all of these things and is, I mean, I would be willing to bet that it's got to be a Captain America movie for you. What is your favorite MCU movie?
Oh, it's Winter Soldier. Winter Soldier is the one I like the most. I think First Avenger is the one I've gone back to the most. It's like comfort food.
Right.
It's just fun to watch. I just enjoy spending time in that world. Those are probably my favorites. I love the Guardians of the Galaxy, especially the first two. I mean, it's hard to go against Infinity War and Endgame. Those are great. I'm probably going to just name every Marvel movie if I keep going, so I'll stop.
Well, let's say, what's your favorite single hero movie? Not like Avengers, just a singular.
And I don't get to say Captain America.
You can say whatever you want.
I mean, Winter Soldier is
Okay.
a thing, right? I
Yeah,
mean,
well, it's a Captain America movie.
when it keeps moving on, you have so many crossovers and so many different characters who intertwine. It's the beauty of the MCU. Every movie almost feels like a Marvel team up kind of adventure, which is fun.
But in order to do that, you have to build these stories.
You got to build the stories.
And you've got to have these secondary characters and everything. And the first time we saw Black Panther was in Civil War.
Yep.
This is a story that interested me since when they announced that he was going to be in this. What do you say about the recasting possibly?
I think that it's probably okay at this point. I don't think they should have recast right away. I think that we got a Black Panther movie where we dealt with the consequences of T'Challa's passing and Chadwick's passing, and it's an okay movie. I mean, it's a hard thing to do. I think at this point, we can pay tribute to the legacy by seeing somebody else in the role.
I think that works as well. And so since I asked you your favorite, and I already know this because we talked about it off camera, least favorite.
I hate to be negative. I don't want to be
I don't
negative.
I don't like being
But
negative
I also had
either.
a hard time with Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
It was tough. I was watching it with the kids, and we couldn't even. They got too scared of the God Butcher, so there just weren't enough farting goats to make them happy, and so that was a tough one.
I thought you were going to go with Eternals.
I was bored with the Eternals. I wasn't like morally upset.
And like you said, when we were talking about the Eternals, it was too long.
It was too long.
It was way too long. And I guess now that they have, and you've seen stills of it from Brave New World, the thing that they created at the ocean at the end of the Eternals is part of everything now.
Which is great.
And they're saying that it's where they get all the adamantium from now.
That's perfect. I think paying off stuff, even in a movie that probably not as many people saw, is good. That's the continuity. Tie it all together. So no, it's not my favorite, but maybe I'll like it better once we tie it into Captain America and other things.
Maybe. And then last time I'll make you choose a movie that you didn't think you were going to like, but you came out of it really enjoying it.
I go in with pretty high expectations, trying to be controlled as I work my way through. I really liked the first Thor. I remember going to the theater to see the first Thor, and I enjoyed it. And I remember thinking at the time that it was very funny. And you go back and rewatch the first Thor movie now, and it's like, it's not that funny. He's got the scene where he throws the mug on the ground.
Yeah.
And boy, that carried me through for like 2 hours of thinking the whole movie was hysterical. But you got those moments of understanding like how good Hemsworth is as a comedic performer, which we definitely get by the time we get to Ragnarok. So I'll say that. I try to be excited about all of them as best as I can. So I didn't go into any thinking I'd hate it. I try not to do that with movies anyway.
Right.
Not that it doesn't happen sometimes.
Well,
but not with the MCU.
That happens. Did you have one that you thought you were just going to hate going to it, and you came out and you actually enjoyed it?
No, I went in knowing I was going to hate it, and when I walked out, I still hated it.
You still hated it.
The Iron Man that had Mickey Rourke in it.
That one wasn't a good one.
That was a horrible.
That was
Mickey
a bad-
Rourke is a horrible actor.
I cannot abide by that. The Wrestler. The Wrestler. Come on.
That was like the one good movie he's made.
But
in like
you've
how
admitted
many-
it. He's pretty good in it.
because he basically played himself. Has been.
What I love in Iron Man 2 is it feels like Mickey Rourke is just like picked out random character ticks. It's like parrot on shoulder, Russian. Like, okay. I was kind of with it. It's weird that it feels so dated when you watch Iron Man 2 now. That there's like a 20-minute race car scene in the middle of it. It's like, what is this?
And I can't believe that Sam Rockwell didn't save that movie for you.
Not even he could do that.
I would love to see him come back.
Yeah.
Oh,
I would
absolutely.
love to see Justin Hammer come back
Absolutely.
into the MCU.
I would love that.
I think it would be great. For me, I would probably say Shang-Chi. I didn't have really high expectations of that movie going in.
Sure.
But it was great. You throw Ben Kingsley in there as Trevor Slattery, you're going to win me every time.
That was fun. And we're going to see him again.
Yes.
Right? We've got Wonder Man series coming up, which, again, the deep cut heroes. I'm here for it.
Yeah.
So.
Now, what do you think about what Disney Plus and the series that they've done?
I've liked a lot of them. I think that you have to deal with the sort of oversaturation a bit. I think that I've talked to a lot of people who kept up on everything. Once the Disney Plus series started, they're like, I just stopped. I can't keep up. I can't do it. And I've had a few that I haven't watched all the way through. I haven't finished Moon Knight yet, and I know I need to. I know.
That was one of my favorites.
I
would love to see him come in. I would love to see him be part of it all.
I think it feels a lot like when you went and bought comics. Is that, there were comics that were on my pull list that I had to have every time. And then there's like, Doctor Strange, that cover looks kind of cool. I don't really care that much about the character, but let's see. And so it felt like you could collect everything before the TV Disney Plus stuff started. But then it became much, much harder. You had to be a real sicko at this point to collect everything. But the ones that I have liked, oh man, I love the Loki series. I was just talking to a buddy of mine today who just out of nowhere said, you know what? I could watch both seasons of Loki anytime, anywhere, and be so happy.
Well, and it's funny that you would bring that up because Owen Wilson's character was loosely based on Mark.
Oh, it's not just loosely. He wears a mustache.
The look, everything.
Everything. And the character was based on Mark in Mark's lifetime. But he has the mustache in tribute to Mark Gruenwald, which is something I'm not even sure Owen Wilson knew. But he said once that he mentioned in an interview that he was growing the mustache out for a Marvel project. And he said later that he got a text on his phone from an unknown number that said strike one on it. So they're very protective of things. It's like, oh, I guess I said something I wasn't supposed to say. But yeah, maybe that's part of my affection would be old Mobius in there.
You can't all be Tom Hollands and just go telling everything. You get a free pass to talk about whatever you want, right? Yeah. That was a great way to bring it full circle. Jason, once again, really appreciate you coming in, spending the time with us today. We've been spending these last two segments with Dr. Jason Olsen from Utah State University Eastern here, who wrote the book, Mark Gruenwald. It's all about his time as the main writer for Captain America in the 85 to 95. Great opportunity. Find the book, read it, and enjoy it. Jason, as I said, is going to be joining us March 6th, 7th, 8th, and 9th. My goodness.
So many days.
For the Man versus Marvel event, we're going to have him sitting in with us on some. He'll join us on Zoom for some, and we'll talk more about that next week, as we will also be talking about the new Captain America Brave New World movie. Ryan's really looking forward to this one. So we'll talk about that next week as well. So until then, go see a movie.